Kia ora e te whānau, ko Victoria Kelly toku ingoa. I am very happy and excited to be sharing this masterclass with you today. We were talking about what might be interesting stuff to do during New Zealand Music Month, which is always such a happy month and so full of awesome music. And we thought that it might be a beautiful thing to do to bring some really incredible storytellers together and explore how we might begin thinking about how to articulate this thing that's happened to all of us, the virus that's ravaged the planet and sent us all into our lockdown environments and done so many profound things to our society that we're aware of now and many that we're not. The changes will be things that we can't see for a long time and will kind of come to fruition in the fullness of time. And I thought it would be really interesting to explore that through a creative perspective, or at least through 4 creative perspectives. As you know, those perspectives are 4 of our most fascinating and intelligent storytellers: John McGlashan, Ria Hall, Tom Scott, and Hollie Fullbrook. All 4 of these incredible creators have got really unique perspectives, very individual voices, and to me, at least, I find the integrity of their work inspiring because it always feels honest and straightforward and it always illuminates me. And so I am fascinated to know how they approach creating this work and how they might be able to share insight with us about how we might be able to start approaching the times that we're in and how to talk about them. So I would love to welcome all 4 of you to this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. We started off talking just before we went live about how mean it is to ask songwriters who spend days and weeks agonizing over how to put 4 words together to actually just suddenly magically talk about their work in the moment. So I thought maybe what we could start off by doing is talking about other people's work. You'll see that there's a Spotify playlist attached to this conversation as well. I chose one of my favorite songs by each of these writers. I asked them to each choose a song of their own. I asked them to choose a favourite song by another New Zealand writer. And I also asked them to choose a favourite song in general. And I would love to kind of, when you listen through to the playlist, it's kind of, it's very strangely different and disparate, but at the same time, it makes a really beautifully weird kind of sense. And one of the things that I noticed, well, there were many things that I noticed that we can talk about soon, but I'd like to start with Gil Scott Heron and ask Tom Scott about that choice, about Pieces of a Man, and what it was about. It's a sorrowful tale. It's the observation of somebody watching something really difficult and sad and also very intimate happening. And I'm interested to know what resonates with you about how he told that story.
First off, thank you so much for having me. Such an honor to be surrounded by these creatives. I honestly think you picked the wrong Tom Scott. I'm the rapper one, not the photographer, not the saxophonist. Yeah, that man has been a huge influence on me since I remember the first time my dad playing Gil Scott in the ride home from school. And he was speaking to rappers at the time, a song called Message to the Messengers. And he was rapping, and he's this old fella rapping to this really weird beat, and it wasn't Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
But I was still listening because I just listened to whatever my dad was playing, and I was getting education, and throughout my life, Gil would come in and out. And when I was my own man, I started digging through his music, finding his music through a lot of other people sampling him and whatnot. And I eventually ended up at that album, Pieces of a Man, which I think is probably his best work. And that song there is a tale about his father being made redundant. And he starts the whole song by saying, "I saw my grandma sweeping, and she's sweeping up this litter that's been ripped." And as you go on through the song, he's just giving you these little pieces into the story of what's happening. And she's sweeping up this litter, which you then find out in the second verse. I saw the mailman handing a letter to my father, and he said, "Don't you take this too hard. They've laid off a whole bunch of people this week. Jimmy, don't yada yada." And then you realize that he's ripped the letter up, had a breakdown, lost everything, and his grandma's sweeping the letter up. And he says, "I realized she was sweeping up pieces of a man." And it's just such a perfect metaphor. It's just so many layers to it. And when I think of a well-told song, I think of that. And I'm someone that uses so many words to convey his message because I'm a rapper, and that's sort of the format that we're expected to speak in. And I like it. I love it. It's what I do best. But for Gil to use such space, to use so few words and to pick them perfectly, and to just pick something that doesn't need any more words to say what it said. This is a letter from my father's boss telling him he's sacked, and my grandma sweeping it up, and that's him broken on the floor. It's just, it's no point explaining it and dancing about architecture, but yeah, that's one of my favorite songs by one of my favorite musicians.
How do you try and get space into your work as a rapper? Like when I read the lyrics, when I sat down and actually read the lyrics to Years Gone By, it's like reading a novel.
Oh, thank you.
In one short, piece of music, like in the time frame of a song, there's a novel in that story. Like each event triggers a memory of my own. We must be of similar. Well, I'm older than you, but I
You look
recognise a
younger,
lot of
that's
those
what we're
things.
saying.
MC Hammer cassettes and everything like that.
Yeah.
But in order to hone your message, in order to tell the story of your own life, you had to leave quite a lot out.
Yeah, I guess so, but I still use 64 bars, so I still
Yes.
could have done it quicker. But yeah, that song's about 36 years, so it took 36 years to write, and it was hard to keep things out. But yeah, in that case, I just wanted to explain my life, and so I chose whatever. And I'd read actually Gil's memoirs, and he does a brilliant job of explaining his life and his story without it feeling linear. He tells his story through Stevie Wonder's tour for Martin Luther King, and he uses all these different like moments of life to tell the overall story. So once again, I think there's so many different ways to tell a story. It can be linear, it can be just a ripped up letter on the floor. But yeah, finding space is something that I've come to over years. Like I'm raised on a genre that's quite like people that fascinate over drum rolls, or protege piano players that play every note on the key. I'm raised in that kind of world where we kind of flex with our technical ability, and after a while you realize that you're misconveying the message due to your flexing. So yeah, space is the place for sure. And something I'm still learning.
In Pieces of a Man also, the personal experience of him becomes political as well, because it's making a comment. I guess I don't want to read things into it that are not mine to read into it in a way, although we can't help but relating these stories to ourselves when we hear them and take them into ourselves. Because at this moment in time, of course, there are enormous amounts of people who have lost their work, and there's this enormous thing that's happening around us, but there's also the personal experience of what's happening to us. And making the personal into a political thing is quite it's a difficult thing to do. Like, I'm quite interested because, Don, your song 18th Day is a political story, but the way that you told that story is through a very different perspective. It's not the imagery is very kind and hopeful, actually, even though the story is a dark and shameful tale. How did you arrive on that approach? Was it, the white feather, the electric spark?
Yeah, I think, well, first off, I'd like to echo Tom and just say what a blast it is to be surrounded by all of you people, and so much talent and energy and commitment. It's just lovely to be here. Thank you for asking me, V. So yeah, the world, it's difficult. Protest songs or anger songs are difficult. The world doesn't need more. Songs which are a call to action are probably the clearest and cleanest protest songs like Free Nelson Mandela. The real, just straight up. That's what the song's about. That's what it says on the tin. and I've never been very good at that stuff. There's another kind of protest song which is more like a space in which to reflect, a place to put those feelings. And what I figure is that sometimes you can be lucky and you can write something which maybe doesn't have all of the information in, as Tom was saying before, in a linear way, but maybe it snags people. It just catches them like you're getting over a fence and it just catches your clothing a little bit as you're carrying on with your life, and that makes those people go to the books and read up about the fact that Te Whiti and Tohu were in prison without trial, and they spent this exile from their people in the deep south, and so I thought it'd be interesting to write it from the perspective of the followers of the faithful just waiting for their prophets to come home, because there's a lot of great songs that are deliverance songs which say, when such and such comes back, we're gonna finish our job, or when such and such comes back, we're gonna have a party. And I had a whole bunch of ideas for that song: the white feather, the images, and the anger, and the plowman plowing at right angles across fence lines. I love that image, and I'm gonna put that in the song one day, but that it wasn't ready to go in that song just yet. And the spark flowing up from the fire, and the electric electric charge on the wire. That's when it came to me that it's a hope song. It's about deliverance, and sometimes those images, when they come, they're not with your brain. They're your subconscious. There's a fire going on in your subconscious, and you're not really aware of it. And I think a lot of what we do as artists is we try to, we're busy with the craft of telling the story, but then something that we don't quite understand comes up from our subconscious and grabs hold of the story, and that's when the good stuff happens. So if sometimes there's a good image there that and you don't know quite what it's there. It can be quite hidden even to you.
Do you keep a notebook?
Yeah, I do. I got a wall full of these things.
Have you?
Yeah.
How far do they go back?
They go back to when I was 16, so it's a big wall now.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's not all good stuff. A lot of it's shopping lists and just bullshit. But
New Year's resolutions.
Yeah. But sometimes one of those things, you're reading it, and it might take me a couple of years to actually finish a song like 18th Day, because maybe I started the idea and it was going to be an angry song, it was going to be a protest song with a call to action in it. Because you're always aiming for that sort of thing. You're always hoping that you're going to write something really straightforward and that's going to gather everybody together. But I think one day I just looked back on that and I sort of looked at some of the bits, some of the writing around that idea, and the thing that jumped out to me was the surprising image from the subconscious, sort of like the old lady sweeping up the letter.
Yeah.
That's a strong image, and if you were going to make a film, you'd gather all of that story and you'd go, which part of the story am I going to start with? Maybe I'll start with the broom and then I'll come out. So that's kind of what I was trying to do.
One of the songs on Ria's set of choices is also a protest song, and I think, would you say too that it's a call to action, Ria? Chant?
Yeah. Yes and no. I think from its first kind of from its inception, it's a song that speaks to the spirituality of a person. So for me, coming from a very strong, deeply embedded Māori background, when shit hits the fan, what do? We gather, we come together, we karakia, we chant. So I was thinking about other cultures around the world that do exactly the same thing in times of turmoil and despair. What do? They congregate, they come together, they pray, they chant. So chant is from that space. It's from a space of trying to, I mean, it's not a very long song, but it's straight to the point, and it's and for me, it's probably the most endearing out of those 7 songs from Manawa Wera. And the fact that it was probably the hardest for me to sing and record because of its because of I want to say taumaha. Taumaha is the weight that you carry when you think about those kinds of situations, but more so because I really wanted to get it right. I really wanted to get it right. I wanted to deliver the vocal storytelling part of it properly, because the kaupapa of it was so charged. And I always think like that. Like when I co-wrote that song with Lawton Cora, and actually we wrote it in here, and I've only just rubbed our tracking and stuff off this off the wall. We wrote it here March last year. So this is a nice space to be in at the moment. So I'm always thinking about how I can match my vocal storytelling style to what I say.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's equally as important as, you know, the lyrics are obviously the first port of call, but the storytelling element through vocalization is, for me, is a big part of the whole, construction of a song and deliverance of a song. So there is a protest element in it, but I think for the most part, it's about remaining grounded. It's about remembering your makeup, remembering who you are, and what defines you, really, whether that be through a cultural perspective or cultural lens, or just in who you are as a human and as a person, and the values that you bring to the fore in this crazy world that we live in. And the song now is so much more relevant because we haven't been able to congregate. We haven't been able to come together. We haven't been able to pray or to chant together to get through this time. But we've only been able to do that through this virtual reality that we now find ourselves in. So level 2, it feels a lot different. It feels I'm not, I'm neither here nor there at the moment. I think I'm still trying to process the fact that we were in isolation for 7 weeks. I wasn't longer. I was in for 8 weeks because I got sick just before we went into the week before we went into lockdown. So 2 months of not much, but it's been a really, really good reflective time, and I've been chanting to myself.
It's interesting too, because there've been all of these conversations about how all of the stuff that people either have been doing or think that they should have been doing during this time, where you're kind of like, well, here I am at home and I've got all my stuff around me. Surely I should have written a novel and mastered a yoga practice and, written a symphony by now. But I've played a lot of Minecraft, and
you know what? I haven't. It's funny that, because everyone's like, this is the most creative time for you. You're at home, you're in your element, you haven't got shit to do at the moment. But it's like, I've been having a lot of anxiety, and so I haven't been able to come up with, with the words or with the tune that is fitting for this particular time. So really, I've just been ruminating on what's been going on. So from that perspective, it's been really that's provided a little bit of comfort in such a time that's full of uncertainty. The rumination and the meditation state has been a nice thing to do, irrespective of the uncertain nature of our time that we're in.
And what you were saying about vocal delivery made me think immediately of the song that Hollie, you chose, by Nadia Reid, because that is a song that I love a lot as well. And I was, again, reading over the lyrics and thinking these lyrics don't even really look like what that song is, because the song is so utterly tied to her vocal delivery and the way that she hangs words over time and then, manipulates them with the shape of what she sings. And you have that quality as well in your work. Do you write specifically for your own instrument, as in your voice? does melody and lyrics and voice all equal kind of like a similar thing, or do you think about them as separate things?
I don't think about my singing voice at all, really. Other than that it is just the way to express the lyrics. So yeah, like I've never had singing lessons, and I feel like in some ways it's something that I try not to think about too much. But the melody is definitely one of the first things that sort of directs the song. So the guitar and the guitar part is what I would say is my kind of instrument, like the bones of the song, really. And then the vocal melody will often the vocal melody will often shape the lyrics, with the lyrics also shaping the vocal melody. It's kind of different for every song. But yeah, no, I don't really write for my voice, which is maybe not a thing. But yeah, I've never considered myself really a singer. Yeah, more of a guitarist, songwriter.
See, I find that really reassuring, actually, because I think, you know, there are some writers who write for this kind of incredibly prodigious instrument that they have technically or able to kind of do all of these extraordinary and practiced things with. And that's amazing and beautiful. And there's a lot of artists like that I love. And then there's also the artists that just are a human being and their instrument is intrinsically human. And the humanness of that is also like, it allows you to relate so closely to what they make as well. One kind of artist is aspirational, and the other kind of artist is, you feel collegiality, I guess, with them. Like, I love Beyonce, but I can't ever imagine experiencing the things that she experiences, and yet her prodigy is extraordinary. And at the same time, you know, an artist like, now I can't think of one, but somebody with a really beautifully, yeah, okay, in the same family, exactly. Totally different way of existing and being in music. And therefore, you can express yourself musically without actually having to be a prodigy. You can actually just let it be coming from exactly who and what you are. So sorry, I just realized that wasn't really a question. That was just me rambling.
It's a good ramble.
But the other song that you chose was Nina Simone. And what was really interesting about that was that I went and just got what I thought was the original version of that song, but then you wrote back to me and said, hang on a minute, no, we need this performance. So your love of that song is also tied to how she performs it. What about the performance is so amazing?
Well, I think Nina Simone is like the queen of interpreting lyrics, and I find like pretty much anything that she sings to be in a really unique delivery, and we're talking about deliverance. But that song in particular, those two different versions, like the recorded version is really like really fast and like bopping along, which is great because it's quite a dark, you know, it's actually a really confronting song about, you know, complete despair, and so I think the live performance with that band at Newport Jazz Festival is just like, it just hits way harder. But for me, that version of it, and I think just the level of being in tune with her band in a really natural way as well. I love that performance of the song so much that for me it does kind of change the lyrics. Like it's still a song about despair, and you know, it's still very confronting, but there's also this like hope and the sunshine coming through the back door, and it actually kind of reminds me of the Gil Scott-Heron song, that kind of image of someone being in a kitchen and sweeping, and the sunlight coming through the back door is like what I think of when I hear the song. Yeah, I've been listening to that song quite a bit during the the lockdown.
Mm.
But delivery, it's funny because I don't really think about singing so much with my own music, but it's what I really, delivery is what I really respond to in other people's music. So that's kind of what I find inspiring, yeah.
A question has come through which is related to what you're saying, in the sense that, or in fact, something that you've all said about these kind of subconscious visions or pictures like the sunlight coming through from the back of the room or the electric spark. How do you approach progressing the story in a song without just saying, this is what happened? How do you bring in all of these other beautiful images, and how do you kind of create beauty and emotion and insight around a subject? Do you have methods for those things? I'll start with Don, and then maybe we can move around everybody, because the question hasn't specified who I should ask.
Oh,
So
wow.
Don, what do you think? Is there a method for bringing out the depths of a subject?
Well, storytelling can be dry and linear, but you run the risk of losing your audience. And if you read a short story, there's a lovely economy where and it's a good short story writer, like a short story writer like Patricia Grace, New Zealand writer, just the most amazing economy of storytelling. She'll start with a little image, you go out from there, somebody will say something, in what they say is encapsulated their whole being. Just maybe a sentence, they'll say something, it's uncle, somebody says something, and that you've met that person, and then it goes from there. And a great storyteller like Bob Dylan can do that. There's I was thinking about Paul Kelly because the other song I chose was a Paul Kelly song, and he's really good at that too. Just that it's almost because we grow up with film, you can describe it as a filmic approach. Like if you're trying to tell a story about a relationship, you don't just say, they lived together for 4 years and the first 2 years went pretty well. You start with the kitchen and you start with a cup and the cup smashes. Or there's a great country song called A Good Year for the Roses. Anybody know that one? It's just this beautiful country song. George Jones wrote it, and it's about this guy just sort of saying, it's over and I'm sad it's over. But it starts, the first words are, I can hardly bear to see this. I can hardly bear the cigarette stains on the cigarette there in the ashtray. So he's starting really, really close up, and then he comes back a little bit and looks at something else. And so, I think you've got to get your story, and then you've got to think around it and like sit back and almost go to sleep and redream the story, so that the good bits, the shiny bits, come and stick to you, and then you might find it easier. And it goes back to what I was saying before about how you keep trying different things, and the thing that is exciting to you and you don't know why, that might be the best thing. Yeah.
Ria, for you, and please stop me if I'm wrong, the impression that I get from your work is that you will write with the kaupapa of a whole album in your mind. And we've talked about that before when we talked about rules of engagement, for instance, and the kind of political kaupapa that existed around all of the songs in that album. So is that, how, with that question in mind that one of our viewers just asked, when you're providing emotion and insight and you're applying it not just to one song, but to a whole kaupapa around something that you're wanting to say over a series of songs, how do you approach doing that? How do you tie all of those things together and make the strings interweave?
We tried. When I say we, I mean Lawton and myself. We tried really hard not to write to a concept for this album, for Manawa Wera. But I think just the kind of woman that I am, that's very what's the word? I'm into social activism. I'm into social commentary. I keep tabs on what's going on the political front. And so a lot of the stuff that I write speaking directly to those things that kind of either make my blood boil, or I want to give someone a hug. It's one of the two, you know. It's kind of that world that I live in. So I suppose, I mean, I'm still learning. I'm still learning what feels good. I'm still learning about how to construct a song, how to bring words together, how to bring stories into one song, and how to frame it. You know, and I really like that. I like the honesty and the fact that I fully admit that I'm still learning, and that's why I love working with people. So that's why this whole period was very difficult not to collaborate with others, because I really enjoy other people's energies and you know, the light or dark or mid that they'll bring into the space. So I suppose when I'm formulating something on my own, I might just formulate, like, I might just sit or ruminate on like 4 lines for 6, 7, 8 months. And then one conversation I might have with someone else, with another songwriter, or not even a songwriter, maybe like a relative or someone, might spark an idea, and I'll be like, shit, that's right. I wrote that. This will relate nicely to that. I'm gonna put that all together now. So I think things are just really, really organic. And then sometimes they're not. Like Mana Wawera, we wrote that work in 4 days. So, you know, I think it just all depends on the context and on the time. But I also don't believe in putting too much pressure on yourself. Perhaps not taking yourself too seriously. And if something doesn't finish, then it just doesn't finish, and that's cool. Just, it is what it is. So yeah, I don't know if that answered it, but I went in a bit of a
well, I think like what I've heard both you and Don say is that there's, and actually all of you say, there's an element of just the simple unknown. There's the chance, there's actually just having your eyes open to opportunities that you see around you, things that you can pluck, things that just make sense. And I guess maybe the thing that I would take away from that as a writer is to just feel more comfortable about letting things happen around me without trying to manufacture them myself, you know, because I often, when you're trying to create something and you have a sense of urgency about wanting to be able to express that thing, there's also a degree of impatience, but not all things want to come quickly, you know. Some things actually you have to go for a walk 3 weeks later and see the glint of a piece of metal under a bush on the ground before you get the eureka moment that, like you described, just brings it all together into a cohesive message or expression of what you're trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tom, for you, so you're not working with melody, you're working with words, you're working with textures and all sorts of musical things happening around what you say, but not melody. So what?
I write a lot of melody.
You do?
Yeah. But not only. But no. I love melody. I'm more drawn to melody these days, to be honest. But I'll let you finish the question. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's all right. I was just, a question had come through from somebody else who was wanting to know about how to start if your musical center is more about harmony, more about chords.
Yeah, I think chords are different. Like, almost to answer the last question at the same time, I think chords are part of what gets the song going in my heart. Yeah, and that's how ideas get going with me. There's no like, I'll think of an idea. I only ever feel ideas, to be honest. I'm hypersensitive. I've had to learn over the many years I've lived that it's my curse and my gift that I'm sensitive to things. And if I ever feel an emotion, it'll pour out of me. You know what I mean? Whether it's anger, sadness, love, whatever, it'll pour out of me. So chords bring emotions out of me. Specific phrasings of chords bring them out of me. Specific ways that the rhythms are played bring emotions out of me. So I always think that that's what I go to spark. That's my spark plug. And yeah, for me it's chords. But also, yeah, so after you do anything for a long enough time, you get sick of it. So I've been really inspired with this last project I've done by melody more so than rapping, you know. And I think you go back and forth between things to find inspiration. But yeah, I think you gotta, as a musician, you gotta let the music speak to you. I mean, I always get to start with some music. I'll sample something from here or play something on this keyboard perhaps, or loop something up, or someone will send me something, but that's what starts the emotion going. Because these days I can only write from here. As a kid, I could just write for fun. I loved it, but now I need to feel something. And I think that speaks a little bit to the last question, that you can't like just sit in a room in the middle of a lockdown and expect to be inspired. Like, what are you painting? Your room? Like, an artist that paints gets at least in front of a mountain or something, you know, something has to happen to paint about. And the same thing with us to write about. We need inspiration, and it needs to come from somewhere. Sometimes it's from the chords, sometimes it's from something happening in life. But yeah, I think one of the reasons why it might be hard to write at this time when we're in lockdown is that we haven't downloaded any new information, you know?
Yeah.
And I also think on that note, we were taught in school to finish an assignment by this due date. And there was a way to finish that. We knew you go to this encyclopedia or you read this book, you get the information, process it, write it down. But art's not like that. It's not information that you process and then spit out and regurgitate. It's usually something happening, you know? So this thing right now, this whole experience we're having with COVID, it's still happening. We're still processing it. It's not, you know, lockdown's done, I need the thing on my desk tomorrow. It's like we're still going through these things, and we still need to keep downloading. I think as artists, you got to be aware that deadlines just hinder your creativity sometimes, you know. Sometimes they speed it up, like Ria was saying, you know, need someone on your back. But I think I think you need to download a lot as an artist and just chill.
Hollie, one of the things that I really love about your music is that it's music of the interior. Like, it really feels like it comes from a very intimate and inner place. Does that translate to, like, have you felt able to create in this space that we've been in? Like, you know, is it an opposite situation for you because a lot of the music you write is close?
I haven't found it too bad. The first 2 or 3 weeks, I was like an anxious ball of energy, and I was just obsessively reading the news and like probably drinking too much. You know, like I was just like, yeah. But certainly, like the last maybe the second half, I started just feeling a bit more relaxed, and as things kind of got better outside externally, I sort of, you know, was able to start looking, you know, within again a little bit. And but still, I mean, I can't say I've finished a whole lot. My band, actually, we had a deadline for the end of April to start workshopping new songs for the next album, and so I did have this kind of deadline to work to, which for me can be really useful, especially when it's just a deadline with, you know, your bandmates. So it's not like a label or something saying you must do this by this point. It's just let's get this going kind of motivation, which I find really good for me. But what I've really been doing is like I do this thing where I just collate everything. So, you know, you're always writing down little snippets of ideas and thoughts, but to actually bring it all together in like a document. So it sounds not very creative, but it's just like, basically I have it right here in front of me, and it's like a Word document with like all of the splurging of thoughts in all the little different places that I do it, whether it's a notebook or like on my phone, or and then I have all these voice memo, you know, little demos of guitar chords. Like Tom was saying, I find chords again like the real like the bedrock of emotion of a song. Gets you feeling like you're getting this insight into this world that you're trying to explain in the song. And so I'll like listen to the demos, and then I'll have the the master document, and I'll just like automatic write into the document, and then I'll print off like like this is the first version of it, but this will be like terrible writing, you know, like really bad stuff. But there will be things in there that that, like Don said, sort of stick out to you as the interesting line or the interesting idea. And so for me, this is kind of like you know, really useful time, because it just gives me that time to bring everything together a bit of like songwriting admin in a way.
I love it.
I love the bulldog clip, Holly.
And
Does
then
it have to be a bulldog clip?
oh yeah, well, like it's
Can't be staples.
my stapler ran out of staples, so
Well, staples spoil the creativity. It's got to be.
And I have to say, that looks like a pretty thick document. That looks too thick for a staple.
well, like I said, there's a lot of rubbish in there, but and also this is like probably 2 or 3 years worth of notes, because I do tend to write pretty slowly and work pretty slowly. But yeah, no, I found the last couple of weeks to be good. And as soon as I start doing that kind of activity, and I'm kind of bringing my consciousness to songwriting, because I am really bad at procrastinating. Then I sat down one night and just wrote a song. Like it just like tumbled out, and then another night, another one kind of like really easily came along. And so I think it was really hard. Like I find it really, really hard. But I think it's about, turning your consciousness to it, organizing your thoughts a little bit, and just allowing it to kind of all percolate and mull and do its thing in your subconscious. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, it all results in something at some stage.
I think that's really important, actually. That idea, I think that there's a perception out there that people should find expressing themselves musically, or in fact in any way, easy. That if you're a good songwriter, it just flows. It's like going to the toilet. It just comes out whether you want it to or not. But okay, terrible metaphor. I'm so sorry. That's why I'm not a songwriter. But actually, the fact that it should be hard work does not mean anything other than you are dedicating creative and intellectual energy towards a craft, right?
That's
and
right.
Of course it can be hard.
Yeah, what you're doing is what our job is to go backwards on the human trait of living on the surface. So most humans, in order to get through the day, they have to live on a pretty surface level. Otherwise, they'd bang into each other in their cars. They'd bang into lampposts as they're walking down the street.
Yeah.
But our job is to say, this is how it is to be human. This is how it feels to be human now. And that's hard, because so much of daily life is about avoiding that issue. So much of daily life is about getting to the supermarket, hitting the next deadline, looking after the kids, voting, all these things that we have to do. And sometimes doing that job involves a sort of archaeology through your own layers. You start off with the top layer, which is the getting by the day layer. And then you go down to the next one, which might be you're worried about your partner. Next one might be, long-term stuff about your mum and your dad. Next layer down. And it takes time to dig through those layers.
Yeah.
And sometimes trick the information to come up. It's an art and a science, and once you do that, it's hard work. And that's the job we have, because when we do it right, other people listen to it and they go, oh my God, I felt like that too. I'm not alone. And that's the job, really. And that's why it's worth all the work.
Someone has asked, does it have to make sense? Do you think about what you're writing and wonder if it makes sense? Does it matter to you if it makes sense to others? Who wants to try and answer that question? Mr. Scott.
I think I try too hard to make sense. So I reckon we should ask someone more poetic like these three. I get a lot too autobiographical, but I think it's a lot nicer to have it interpreted by the listener.
I don't agree, Don. I don't agree. What do you got? The one about where you're at the ATM, fingers crossed at the ATM.
Right. Okay.
That's just this moment. and it's
But it's still quite
the whole
literal.
life.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I heard someone, the dude from Please Don't Judge, but on that Song Exploder thing I just listened to, whoever was the guy from Weezer, saying that he writes down on purpose things that make no sense. Like the teacher was named Mrs. Summer Solstice or whatever, and this person's here, and he puts them together almost like when you cut words out of a book and place them on the page, you know, so that it's even more easier to misinterpret. And I think what we're all going to get to here is that there's so many different ways to do it. But yeah, I think sometimes leaving some things to the listener is a brilliant way to do it, but also sometimes hitting your point is the whole point of it.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, sometimes you paint a picture and then you go, no, that's too on the nose. I'm going to get my eraser and just rub bits out.
Yeah. I think with music, you know, with music, they genreify you based on what it sounds like. You know, this is soul, this is country, this is pop, whatever. But they hardly ever genreify you in terms of how you tell the story, whereas in film they do. You know, that's an autobiographical film, that's sci-fi, that's a thriller, that's, you know what I mean? Like, and I think we're here all talking about different genres of songwriting. Sometimes, you know, there's different ways you can do it. It can be abstract, it can be very literal. Yeah.
Do you ever give up on ideas, any of you? Do you like get to a point where you're like, okay, I need to finish this song, but it's going nowhere, I'm going to leave it alone and start something else? Or do you sometimes persist and see, like Ria, would you, if a song is going in the wrong direction for you, do you give up on it? Do you push on? Do you start something else?
Yeah, I probably stop for a bit on it and just let it be, let it do its thing on the on paper or wherever I've kind of put it down, and then I more than likely will start on something else, or that thing that I've started over there, it might end up working with that thing that I put down over there. So I suppose it's just all contextual, you know. But I think the key word in this conversation today has been about being linear. You know, and sometimes shit isn't linear, and sometimes things are, you know, they present themselves however they will, and it's what you do with that presentation that kind of informs your next step.
Sometimes there's a value in going and working, going a long way down the wrong path. It's like Hollie was saying before, sometimes you work away at pretty doggedly at something, and then you just take a bit of a break and two songs just come to you. And that happens to me a lot. So sometimes I'm sitting there working away at something that I'm starting to feel bad about. I'm starting to think, oh no, this whole idea is, I'm approaching it from the wrong angle, or it's too, you know, it's there's something wrong with it. But I keep going for a while because I think that I'm going to earn that little break where two bright, shiny things just come out, you know, without me thinking about it too much.
I think the problem is that we've all had so many experiences where it has worked and where it hasn't, that there's never one formula. So you sort of just got to be open to the fact that it could come any way. It could be, if I sit here for another 8 hours and agonize over it, it'll come like that last song I wrote. Oh no, actually I should sit here just for 20 minutes and then leave because it's going to come from the heart like that other song I wrote. But it's like, it's never a formula. I've been doing it for this long. What about you, Don? Have you found something that's like, after all these years, yes, I got it, this is the way I do it, or is it still open?
Wow. No, and there's some songs, which there was a song in the Muttonbirds, towards the end of the Muttonbirds, where it was a totally new thing for me. It was more like words pouring out, because I'm quite stingy with words. You know, I'll have a line and then I'll wait for 10 bars and then there'll be another line. But I had this song called "Pulled Along by Love," which it just came to me, and I wanted it to be like the energy of the crowded railway station platform that I was trying to describe. I wanted it to just be ideas tumbling out, you know. And I'd never written like that. And then at the end of it, I thought, oh yeah, why isn't it any good? Why don't I like it? We recorded it and we put it on a record, and it was a single and everything like that. And then years later, like 20 years later, I was on tour. And we were just doing just a duo thing with me and Shane Carter. And we looked at that song again, and I suddenly realized that it needed another verse. The structure was wonky. You know, I'd done that thing that you do when you do 2 verses and then a chorus, and then 1 verse and then a chorus, then 1 verse and then a chorus, just because you think people are in a hurry to get to the chorus. And in that song, it wasn't a good idea. So I just, 20 years after we'd released the song, I wrote another verse, and I'm much happier with it now. And we did it on the Muttonbirds tour, and the other guys went, "Oh, it's better. It's longer than it used to be. What's happened?" Sometimes you never finished.
What role does the opinions of other people play just in general for you guys? Like, when you write songs, do you play them to other people and ask them what they think? Do you have trusted people that you go through and know that if they actually tell you something that they want to hear, you'll respond to it as opposed to disregarding it? What about you, Hollie? Do you have a sounding board, or do you ever use sounding boards?
I do have sounding boards. I suppose my bandmates are the most obvious sounding boards. But other songwriters, I would probably be, I would trust them enough to share something if I was really unsure of where it was going. If I was just like, is this terrible? Which is often how you feel, right, before you played something to anybody else. Like in lockdown, it has been a bit more of that reaching out to other songwriters and sort of supporting each other a little bit, which has been nice. But probably in normal times, it's my bandmates who would be the ones that I first play something to. And it's always terrifying. Even if they're like my best friends, it's always terrifying. Yeah.
It is a terrifying experience. I hate playing music to other people for that reason, because the idea that I think I'm more scared that they'll nod and smile and not like it but never tell me, and yet I would never want them to really tell me if they thought it was dreadful. So no one can win, least of all me. I have a question from the mighty Sean Donnelly here.
Oh my God. Hi, Sean.
Who says, hello, beautiful people. Do you have any reliable means of finding inspiration when it seems to elude you?
Marijuana. It's a good way to get out of the square. Honestly, I don't use it all the time. I can't function all the time like that, but sometimes just when you're stuck in one frame of mind, get
something
a little bit out of your
consciousness.
mind. Yeah, it's helpful. I would recommend it to writers, but not every day. Children.
What about you, Ria?
Yep.
I love that answer. I mean, that's not my thing, but yeah, that's a great answer. I think just having something to put things into perspective is helpful. And since becoming a mum, I don't want to sound cliche, but it really has it's given me a lot of perspective, because for the longest time, I had been putting myself at the forefront of the picture, and now the forefront of the picture has shifted and I'm in the background and my son is in the front. So I'm having, and it doesn't need to be your child, it could be, something else, but just something that just tells you, there's something bigger than me and my mere existence that provides a bit of inspiration and perspective.
What about you, Don? What's your go-to method for jolting yourself out of creative atrophy?
I wish, Sean, I had a reliable one. I've complained to you many times when I'm blocked, and you've complained to me. But there's one quite useful thing, I think, is that it's okay to look at other people's work. It's okay to look at other songs and contact your own fan, your own inner fan. And it's like being hungry. It's best to plan what you're going to make for dinner when you're hungry. If you've just had lunch and you're not very hungry, then it's like, I can't be asked thinking about what to make for dinner. But if you're hungry, then it's more exciting, and working on a song or thinking about a song, you can sometimes just draw on what someone else has done. That doesn't mean stealing from someone else, but you can just go, well, I went to that just to use a food metaphor again, to stretch it, I went to somebody's place and they fed me this thing with rice and black beans and chicken, and it was really good. And, you know, I don't know exactly how to put it together, but I'll put those things together in my own way and see if something happens. And it's quite okay to do that. It's quite okay to start that way. You know, you can listen to a song that you're a real fan of. And I don't mean the song that you just admire. You know how there's another level of loving a song, which is like, if it comes on the radio, I have to pull the car over and stop and listen to the whole song, and then I can start the car again. It's those sort of songs, and listen to a song and think, why do I love it that much? Could I do my own version of that? You know, not my own version using the chords, stealing the words, but my own version, like the intensity of it, or maybe the situation, and then take that situation and start again. And obviously, you know, you can, you know, when you've got it nearly finished, you can sort of tweak it so that it's more yours and not borrowed from someone else. But I think it's totally valid. It's a totally valid approach. You know, like I had a song, you know, I went through a stage of really loving Maggie May by Rod Stewart. You know, like it's just a story. I just loved the story. I loved the sort of the fact that it started at this moment when somebody was looking at somebody and choosing an action, or he was at a fork in the road. You know, and I thought, I want something with that energy. I want something with that sort of, it's a fork in the road type story. And so I sat down and I wrote this thing, and it turned into While You Sleep, which is not like Maggie May at all. It's a really quiet little song, little lullaby song, but it's about a fork in the road, or it's about the things you say to someone when they can't hear you, which essentially is what Maggie May is. And so I think it's quite okay to give yourself a jolt by listening to something that you're a fan of, and starting with that, maybe.
That's really, stand by for my next song, Beautiful Phase, which is a riff on a Sean Donnelly song called Beautiful Haze, which I'm now going to copy and use as mine. Anyway, jokes don't work on Zoom.
Yeah, they do.
I think in some ways we all improvise on other people's themes, eh? As writers, you all take a thing and improvise on it, and that other people's work interweaves with your own, and that what's different about your own work is just the lens of your own identity and your own perspective that then transforms this collection of treasures into something of its own. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hollie, what do you do? I mean, I'm going to try doing the stream of consciousness Word document because I love the idea of musical admin. Do you have any other things that you try and do to spark your creative spirit when you have a deadline looming, or when there is something that you know you have to achieve?
Yeah, if I'm honest, then I will like stockpile books around me that I find like light up something in me. So whether it's like, you know, poetry volumes, or you know, books of paintings or prints, or just you know, go to the op shop, find a bunch of books that just have stuff in them. And I just find that a lot easier to deal with than like looking at my phone. So I have to put the phone away as the first thing, and then I have to just you know, do that little that feeling of just opening up yourself. It like, often I'll wake up and I'll just not be in that mood, but sometimes I'll wake up and I'll be like, I'm feeling more open to receiving inspiration. And for me, it's like a frame of mind that I wish I could be in more often. It's not something that I feel like I can magically turn on and off, but if I'm feeling pretty good, then I will like go into a book and just randomly look at, you know, read a passage, and it's almost like a little electric shock to your imagination, because it starts your own brain visualizing another place or another person's experience, and in that way it just kind of it almost just like gets you out of that kind of funk of being really that place of just allowing stuff to come to you. I think when you read, you actually have to like go and meet it halfway. I feel like we've had this conversation, Sean, but it's that experience of going halfway to something rather than just like being a passive receiver. Do you know what I mean? But it is a frame of mind, and I wish I knew what could. Maybe it's marijuana.
I would like to say that APRA Amcos New Zealand Limited in no way takes responsibility for any opinions expressed by its panelists. I mean, I'm sure we don't, but there are so many amazing questions coming through. I'm just going to read you some of them and ask you to approach them if you can. How big a role does your audience or market play on your songwriting? Do you think about your listeners and writing for them and making musical decisions based on what they want to hear or expect from you?
No, to be honest, I'm going to say no.
I don't think I do either. Maybe in the very last stages of finishing a song, maybe you'd kind of scan it over. This kind of ties back to a previous question about, like whether you think of it from somebody else's perspective. And I think, whether you try and make sense of it. I think there is a part of your like scanning when you're maybe in the late stages of a song that you would go, how is this going to be received by the listener? And that's probably, I don't really think like, are the Tiny Ruins fans going to be, completely confused by this crazy new material? I don't think that. Do you guys?
Yeah, what about you, Ria?
No. No, I think that would kind of just send my anxiety through the roof if I gosh, I sound like an angsty person in lockdown.
We all are. We're musicians. We're supposed to be. Can I just say on that note though, I gotta contradict myself. I love writing songs for people. Like I love writing a song going, this will empower the people in my neighborhood. The last project that I put out, I did that. I wanted to make it for people because I wrote the Avantdale Bowling Club album, ironically entitled, named after the place my dad texted me from one day. And no one in Avondale played it. It's too, wanky. And people are driving past me playing other people's music. So I wanted to make something for people from my neighborhood with this last thing I did called Juice. And I hear people drive past playing it. The lady selling Jehovah's Witness pamphlets said, Tom, I love your music. Let me get a photo. So I think in that way, that's a little bit different because I love making music for people. But
also
it's still for yourself, essentially, I think.
Yeah. I think
it needs to come from here, essentially.
Like with Ria, you do a lot of work with that's it's about getting people to understand their history, and it's like shining a light on issues in the community that you think need to have a light shone on them, and that's another job that we have as artists. But basically, you're saying, what does this community need to hear? That song, The Prisoner, that you got, which is just basically looking at there's different ways of being a prisoner. Sometimes the jailer is also a prisoner of some sort. That's really cool. That and I think that's as I say, it's another job that we have as artists. But generally, in order for you to be happy with it as a writer, your first audience member is you. You got to you're not just saying, what do people need? I'm going to make this thing that people need. You're saying, what do I need? I'm going to make this thing that I need. To remind myself of history, to remind myself of the things that my community could benefit from. I think that's it's a different approach, a slightly different approach, and it's a very fraught one. It's a hard path to follow. And some of those songs take the longest to write. They're the hardest ones.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I wonder about that. You know, the idea of writing for other people. I think as long as it belongs to you, you know, I often you think, what's the purpose of what I'm making? Is it so that other people understand me, or is it so that other people understand a thing, or is it so that
No, I was just going to say maybe it's so that other people can understand themselves through me.
Exactly.
Because I do think that there comes a point when you have to acknowledge your responsibility as a songwriter. You know, you start off as this selfish little rapper in his room, and then after a while, you're like, people will listen to this and will be influenced by this. And then you have this responsibility. And I think we're all looking for purpose in life. If not, maybe that's the thing we're looking for more than anything. And I love finding my purpose and giving people something through my music. So yeah, I think I'm kind of contradicting myself even more with this answer. I don't think I do essentially write for myself. I write from myself, but I don't think I write for myself.
I think that's it. I think that's it, Tom. I think that's what we were actually trying to say, is that it ends up becoming so innate within you, because like I will subconsciously write songs that like what Don was saying, that shine a light on a certain event or a certain kaupapa or something that I believe strongly within myself, and not realizing that this is actually something a section of our society need to hear. So I suppose inadvertently, in that sense, it's for them, or for, you know, for a wider grouping. But because it's just something that I can't help but do. I suppose I'm not thinking about that final, you know, that final layer. So I think I've just shined a light on myself at the moment in terms of the songwriting process. So this is a really good kōrero.
I think your job, and it gets back to that first question, V, about what we can do in this crisis. You know, the job is to witness. You know, and witness is a big word, because it's got a few different sides to it. There's sort of bearing witness, which means like telling the truth that you hear and trying to put it in a really clear way. But there's also just witnessing in the sense of looking clearly. You know, look, if you're called upon to, you know, if you've walked past something that, like an accident, and the police ask you to be a witness, all that means is you've got to be detailed. You've got to think really hard. And really get that thing that happened, you know, just the same way that you know, when we're writing, we don't just want to get the two people talking to each other. If it's two people talking to each other in our song, we want to get the color of the wall behind them and the flowers in the flower pot, you know, and if that's important, if that's helping us tell the story. So it's all about witnessing. And if you have a calling inside you to witness in a way that is like giving truth to all these people, you know, to stand up and speak on behalf of a whole bunch of people and, you know, tell them this important thing that they need to know, then that's cool. That's one way of doing it. But just witnessing your own humanity in a crisis situation like this, just basically sitting in a room and going, this is how I feel. I feel very strange, or I'm now meditating. I'm given a bit of space now, so I can meditate on the relationship I had with my mum years ago, you know, or my auntie or something like that. That's witnessing as well, and that's just as important. And if you do it right, people will feel more human. And you know, we're learning now in this lockdown. We're learning that people are starting to realize that music's not just like another niche, another activity like pig hunting, or you know cross country, you know, like long distance swimming. It's not just one of these weird things that people do. It's a central thing in our lives, and if we don't have it, we're really missing something. So I think that's what sometimes kicks me into gear when I'm having a slow morning.
Is it a responsibility to witness with a degree of I don't know, how objective should people be, or how subjective should people be as they approach writing? You know, there's honesty and there's integrity, and then there's also, you know, I'm asking a strange question. I've been really fascinated by the amount of time, you know, what I see on social media and people expressing opinions and putting forth ideas and things like that, and the range of opinions and how they make me feel and how I respond to them and the sentiments that I see flowing around. And I wonder about that, what you witness, and whether or not there are some things you need to, I don't know, curate or withhold, or how you kind of make those decisions about what to not say, what to not point out. Does that question make any sense?
Yeah, you've got to be Janet Frame said something really cool. She said that somebody said, why don't you take a taxi to she was doing a bunch of interviews or something, and she said, if I took a taxi, I'd be all smooth when I arrived. I wouldn't have anything sticking to me. And so if she took a bus, it means there's more impressions stick to her. And the thing about her as well is that she was a very sensitive person, so she had to, you know, she obviously had to stop things, lots of things sticking to her. So you've got to make those choices. You've got to find that somewhere on the continuum between being completely smooth, being completely yourself, you know, and being completely awash in the world of people and hearing the babble of voices. You know, I think turning off the internet or not going on the internet for a long while you're trying to write is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
But everybody's got to find their own place on that continuum, and I like to be a bit more solitary myself.
One thing I've found about I've been 2 weeks while my newborn's here, just looking after my girl and my boys, and I haven't been able to write. And so I've been on Twitter way too much, just saying everything that angers me about, you know, these police, police out in South Auckland, and the fact that they're going to have the right to invade without a warrant now. And I've just been, and usually I'd be in my room putting it into music. I don't know what I'm saying about that, but I just wanted to get that out. I just feel like us as musicians, we need to be in the studio, or we'll go and say something stupid on Twitter, you know? Not that I don't still feel that way, but I'd rather put it into a song that could, you know, really articulate what I want to say.
Yeah.
I would like to thank all of you so very, very much for being part of this conversation. We have just gone over an hour by 13 minutes. And I feel like we could keep talking for much, much longer, but I think we've run out of time. Can I ask you to each, before we finish, can we just go around you all, and can you each offer a thought or an insight that you have now at this point in your lives as songwriters that you would tell yourself as a young writer?
Wow.
Just putting you on the spot and asking you to come up with something without spending time thinking about it. What wisdom of your own would you impart to a younger version of yourself, Ria Hall?
On the spot. I really resonated with what Tom was saying earlier about giving yourself space. So, you know, and really relishing space. So when I'm thinking about space, I'm thinking about, like, you know, space and the ability to create music, giving yourself space, giving your whānau space, giving your being a sense of space. And I think that my younger self was real, you know, I was cramming a whole heap of stuff in, and there wasn't a lot of room for space. And I actually made space a thing for when we wrote Manawa Wera. It's a very spacious album. So there's like, you know, 2 minutes of my first song, History, where I don't sing anything at all. I just let the music speak and give that space. So I think in terms of the songwriting process, I think space is ideal. Like, yeah, I think I would tell myself that, and not just in the songwriting space, but just in terms of how I think, my thought process, and life in general, just having your time, your space, being able to meditate, ruminate on stuff. And yeah, I think that's what I would tell myself. Don't force yourself to cram things in. Just give yourself a bit of space.
What about you, Hollie?
I'd probably say worry less and back yourself, have your own back, and just that kind of classic. I think when you're young, you're figuring out who you are and what you think, and I think just allowing yourself to be okay doing that. Don't feel like you have to have it all figured out, and just be open to any kind of experience or other perspective that comes along, because it all is like helping you on that journey of kind of figuring yourself out, I think.
Tom, what do you think? What would you tell yourself?
I think I'd take a sort of Back to the Future Marty McFly approach and warn him about becoming me, because I think I've got more to learn from him, to be honest. I think I'd tell him, don't get so serious, bro. Like, stay writing about the mundane things in your life, because that is actually the most interesting. I think I've gotten to this point where I'm trying to get too complex with things, and I've been watching this BBC comedy called This Country, and it's just about these two bums out in the middle of some shithole in England, and it's just so hilarious. But they do nothing ever happens in it, but it's just brilliant. And I think I'd like to go back to making that kind of art, because that sometimes is the most interesting stuff.
And finally, Dawn?
I just probably tell my young self, like Hollie said, to worry less, to look after. I'd say to the young fella, look after yourself, get plenty of rest, keep your eye on the detail of life. Because if you're anxious and you're trying to achieve too much, then some important thing will pass you by, and just look after yourself, because what you're doing matters to people. It will matter to people on some level,
This might sound really, sorry.
No, go for your life. Go.
Might sound quite lame, but what Don just said kind of triggered a little thing. If anyone feels like reading quite a cool poem, there's one called "Everything Is Waiting for You" by David White, Whyte, and I read it yesterday, and it just kind of reminded me to, like you said, keep in touch with the detail of life and the small things. So yeah, if anyone feels like a nice little bit of poetry
Thanks, Hollie.
to end the session, that's my little thought.
Thanks, Hollie.
I'm going to add "A Good Year for the Roses" to the playlist, and I'm going to put that poem up on Facebook so that people can go and read it. Thank you so very, very much. I have learned so much from you all, and I've been taking notes while you've been talking so that I can read back over all of your tips for your young selves and apply them to my old, decidedly middle-aged self. Thank you for your generosity and your insight and your wisdom, and most of all for your songs.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you, everybody. What an honor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ria.
Kia ora, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye. See you soon. Bye.
Ka kite.